Well, you're about to get your mind blown. Did you guys understand this here?
Yeah.
You did? Okay.
Wesley totally understood, right?
Yep. Got it right when I walked in.
That's good. Alright. So, you know the ohms thing. You know what ohms are? Resistance. I don't know how much you know. I have no clue.
No.
We're just gonna, he's been here a couple times. So.
Go for it.
Let's take, this is just a chart basically. Now we have 0 degrees, this is Fahrenheit, 100 degrees, and 200 degrees.
Okay.
And this is, for simple, let's go 200 ohms, 100 ohms, and I can't go 0 ohms though. 200 ohms, 150 ohms, and 100 ohms. So the thermistor changes. This is just a graph. The thermistor changes. Let's say it goes this way. So at 0 degrees, it has 200 ohms, low resistance, or high resistance. As it goes hotter, the resistance goes down. I'm not sure which is a negative coefficient and a positive coefficient. One of them goes down when it gets hotter, and one of them goes up when it gets hotter. It's just the difference of it. But you can, a lot of times on some of the old Chevys at least, you can find an actual chart what your thermistor. Thermistor is so in your car. You ever see that joke about the guy? The lady sends the guy, her husband, a picture of a guy on the toilet taking a dump. Have you ever seen that on Facebook?
No.
You haven't? It's a -4. It looks hilarious. It does look like a guy's taking a dump though. It's a -4. How does that get there? How does it know what temperature it is?
Oh yeah.
Thermistor. It's underneath the front of the car. Ambient air temp sensor. Ambient air temp sensor is a thermistor. So on a car, you have ambient air temp sensor. You have thermistors inside. How does your heater and control module, if it has automatic temperature control, know where to put it and stay? Thermistors. Intake air temp sensor, coolant temp sensor are the critical ones for fuel injection. I'm trying to think how many more there is on a car. Not a lot.
So it gives heat by.
It doesn't give any heat. It measures heat.
Measures heat.
So the voltage, like I had up here before,
Yeah.
It makes a difference.
Huh.
So if the end of the thermistor is at 0, morning Dan. If the end of the tip of the thermistor is at 0 degrees Fahrenheit, this is Fahrenheit by the way. It'll have 200 ohms in that thing. And the computer has, let's say that, let me draw that other thing out I just did. Yeah. Draw a regulator, like a resistor. So, and then we gotta draw our little guy here. Remember this little guy?
Little guy makes decisions.
Little decision maker.
Comparator.
Comparator. That's the actual true name for it. A comparator. And then it goes over here. It has a, I'm gonna call this the we're just going to use the ambient temp sensor because it's easy to reference. So this is 5 volts. This is the, I think the thermistor is like this. I think it has a line through it. It comes out the other side and then it goes to ground. So let's say this is 200 ohms. In the computer, it has a resistor of 200 ohms, and that's resistance. So when this is 0 degrees, or let's see, yeah, when this is 0 degrees Fahrenheit, and when the car's 0 degrees outside, the, this has, so if this will have 200 ohms at 0 degrees Fahrenheit. 200 ohms, 0 degrees Fahrenheit. So we have ground all the way right to here. And this is a resistor, and this is a resistor. They're basically fighting each other. We have 5 volts in ground. So we have 200 ohms here and 200 ohms here. Anybody tell me what the voltage is going to be in that line right there? I did this last week, or the week before. So if the resistance is the same in both of these sensors, they both drop at half the same amount.
So it'd be
So
2.5.
it'd be 2.5 volts.
Makes sense.
Make sense?
Pressure.
Now think of this as, let's say you guys are both the same strength, both arm wrestling. You guys both can exert 200 pounds of force on each other's hands. Where's your hands go? Nowhere. It's about the same. I mean, that's not maybe a great analogy, but basically nobody's winning. They're both winning the same amount. Okay? So let's take this person, and let's say this is Arnold Schwarzenegger, arm wrestling. Okay? Well, actually, let's do it the other way. Let's say this is Nancy Pelosi.
Okay.
All right, and this is, we're going to make this Arnold Schwarzenegger. He is, so we're going to drop this down to 200 degrees Fahrenheit, we're going to put that to 100 ohms. So this is more like Arnold Schwarzenegger, not quite that much, but let's put that at 100 ohms. So lower ohms can do more work. Lower resistance do more work. High resistance is closer to a wire being completely open. A wire completely open is OL, out of limits. It's completely open. It's like a burnout light bulb. That's you, Wesley?
That's me.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So we got 2.5 volts if they're both the same. If Nancy Pelosi is arm wrestling Nancy Pelosi, we got 2.5 volts because it splits it in half. Okay? So if we allow this to do more work, what's going to happen to that voltage?
It's going to go up.
It's going to go up. Voltage originates here.
Oh, wait.
It's pulling it down stronger because this is the ground. There's more pull to the ground side. So what's going to happen to that voltage? It was 2.5 if they're both 100. I don't know the formula for this, but does it go up or down? This becomes stronger to ground.
You're saying there's less ohms, all right?
There's less ohms. 100 ohms instead of 200 ohms. It becomes stronger.
Wouldn't that mean there's more voltage? Because less
Well, voltage
resistance.
originates over here. This didn't get stronger. This got stronger.
Oh, okay.
The pull to ground
That
got
makes more
stronger.
sense.
that part would be lower.
That part would be lower then.
So instead of, if we had 100 ohms and 200 ohms, Wesley might know the formula. I don't know the formula.
No, I don't.
So it might be, it's probably going to be close to, I'm going to say probably 1.5 volts, 1.25 V. Okay, does that make sense?
More would be on the ground side, right?
I'm just going to ask the same thing.
More what?
More would be on the ground side, correct? Then?
It's pulling more towards ground than it is towards power.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because the ground there's a stronger path to ground. There's at least less resistance to ground. It's going to pull the ground. So if you just took a jumper wire and went like this, jumper to jumper, what would that voltage be? Jumper wire has 0 ohms. And that is an Arnold Schwarzenegger. What would it be?
5.
Nope. 5's over here. I got Nancy Pelosi and Arnold Schwarzenegger. Who's going to win?
So is
0 ohm. The lower the ohms, lower ohms.
It'll be 0.
wow, it's still got some resistance, so it would be.
Well, that makes sense because the ambient temp sensor is limiting how much
Yeah.
it's pulling to just
It pulls this voltage
2.5
down.
and
Yeah.
So,
all 5 volts.
yeah.
Does that make sense, guys?
Yep.
So what if this went to what if this went to 300 degrees Fahrenheit? And And this went from 100 ohms to 50 ohms. What would happen to that voltage? Would it go up or down? With 100 ohms, let's say we had a $1.25 volts, and we're going to drop the ohms more. When you drop the ohms more, does it do more or less work?
More work.
More work. Okay, so it's pulling it harder towards what? It's pulling it harder towards what?
The ground.
Okay, so what's that voltage going to do?
Go down.
I'm gonna guess drop down.
Go down?
Yeah.
You're going to guess drop down?
I'm gonna take a wild guess. No, I think it's gonna.
Does Nancy Pelosi or Arnold Schwarzenegger win in a arm wrestle?
I'm gonna say I think it goes down to 1.
Well, you're probably right. So 200 ohms versus 50 ohms. I don't know if you can exactly divide them or not, but yeah, like 0.9 probably. I'm just gonna say 0.9 volts.
With Ohm's law, you probably could get pretty close.
Does Andrew know? I mean, this is Tuesday, right?
Probably forgot.
Same for Katie.
Same for Katie.
I don't know, I got over there and I'm like, man, there's only Ace's clock today.
Yeah. Okay, so a negative coefficient. Wesley, do you know a positive coefficient thermistor? Does it go up? More temperature, does the ohms go higher? It does, doesn't it?
I think that is correct.
So this would be a negative. So more temperature, the ohms goes down. So this would be a negative coefficient. Okay? Because as the temperature goes up, the ohms goes down. That's
Positive would be reversed.
Positive coefficient would start here at 0 degrees Fahrenheit, 0 degrees Fahrenheit, 100 ohms.
Wait, well, let me think of that for a second. I'm thinking here. My brain's still.
I think it does.
Because I'm going. If you have.
Typically, when you warm something up, the resistance goes up. So that'd be
It goes up. Correct. Like we have an injector that gets high
Yep.
high heat. It goes
Yep.
up out of spec.
So negative would be backwards. I
correct.
think, yeah.
And let's don't leave my brain going here.
Positive coefficient. So at 0 degrees Fahrenheit, so if it's really, really cold in the winter, the intake air temp sensor is 100 degrees. And then if it gets 200 degrees, is 100 ohms, sorry. 200 degrees Fahrenheit, that goes up to 200 ohms. That make sense?
Yeah, may I ask
This is
why?
positive, this is negative coefficient.
Why do they have negative and positive coefficients?
They just do, I don't know.
Uh,
I can't answer that question,
I would
honestly.
say
Because you
probably.
could always use one or the other. It just, literally, it comes down to what this guy's looking at.
Okay.
If he wants to look at it, go higher with higher ohms, higher temperature, or lower with lower temperature. Whatever. That's really all it does. All you have to do is tell him that this means that and that means that.
Okay.
The thing to remember that's really hard to get in your head is lower ohms means more work. Also known as Arnold's working rate. He has 1 ohm. Okay?
Lower ohms means more.
Lower resistance means more work.
Which I guess does make sense, allows it to flow more.
But you think when you look at the ohm meter and it says 300, oh, that's pretty good. That's pretty high.
Okay, now
Well,
okay.
300 won't do shit for work. It just don't.
That's true.
300 would not even light a light bulb at all. So, you guys all got that pretty good?
Yeah, could you give like more? Where are there thermistors in a car? Like, that's a type of sensor, correct? Just so I know.
Yep. Okay, so we got a lead here and a lead here. I should have drew that down there because that could actually make it look like one. And then you got a coolant pipe here. Coolant pipe. And out the other end, you got a little hole in it, it's dripping down here. And this is a big reservoir. I'm putting water in here. So it's measuring the coolant, the temperature. So the thermistor is right on the end here. The thermistor works right here. So it goes down here and it has this little thing here. Just let's say that goes to the ground and it has a little thermistor right there. So how's that change this morning, Andrew? Huh?
I don't even know. I didn't even think about it. I totally overslept.
Well, I don't know where Caden's at. You want to text him somebody?
I don't have his number.
I gotta have it.
Andrew's got his number. Does that make sense? So this
Yeah.
could be intake air, this could be coolant temperature, this could be ambient air temperature, this could be the vent temperature, this could be all kinds of stuff like that.
So there's a lot of them on a car.
There's quite a few. I can't think of any other ones though. Anytime they need to know what temperature. Because honestly, there's probably temp sensors inside this computer that actually tell the little man what temperature the actual computer is.
There's temp sensors in tires.
In tires? Yeah.
In tires.
Yep.
There's temp
Yep.
sensors. So if your tire gets up to like 200 degrees, it's obviously going to need to know that.
I know.
Yeah. As pressure goes up, as temperature goes up in a tire.
How can you tell if the sensor goes bad? Do they go bad often?
Great
or
question.
no?
Great question. Okay, so this let's say this. I think this might be bad. But I know that this here is 100 degrees, right? That's a known. 100 degrees Fahrenheit. If I want to test the sensor, how would I do it? That's a great question. So you take a lead, go in here, voltmeter, and you go there, and you go there. So what should that read? 100 degrees Fahrenheit. What should it read?
Is it a
Let's
positive
say
or
it's
negative?
positive coefficient. Most stuff I think is positive coefficient.
So it would be 150.
It'd be 150.
So 150 ohms?
Yeah.
Yep. If you got 150 ohms at that point, that sensor's good. What if you got 200 ohms? It's gonna tell the computer it's 200 degrees. 200 ohms, right? What if it says 100 ohms? We know this is 100 degrees. If it says 100 ohms though.
It's bad.
Bad because it says it's telling the computer I'm zero.
Yeah.
It's all what this guy comparators thinks inside. Does that make sense? Another way to do it, like an intake air temp sensor, you can pull that thing out and spray ether on it and get it cold or break clean, let it evaporate. Good morning, Joe. Let it evaporate and you watch the ohms go. Or take a little torch and hold it about this far away and just hit it and watch it go. Or down, one or the other. This thing will just start integrating 150, 140, 130, 120, 100, 95, 80, whatever it goes to. So just I've done that. Like, it works.
That's cool.
Playing with them to see which
Honestly,
way they go.
what?
Playing with them to see where they go.
Yeah, see where they go to. And honestly, by that you can tell if it's a positive coefficient or a negative coefficient. If you made it hotter and the ohms went down, you'd know it's a negative coefficient. Another thing is, if you can actually grab the very end of it, grab it with your hand, and you know it's about 95 degrees after it sits for a little bit. Make sense?
Yeah. I freaking love thermistors.
You like yours?
I do. Those are fascinating. You have to take them out on a date.
Morning, Griffin.
It's awesome engineering.
I can tell by his shoes.
Yeah. I've already said it's so impressive. You can tell I had the doors open.
You missed the thermistor class.
That's good.
Oh man,
Unfortunately, so did Caden.
Leslie's gonna teach me.
Yeah, well, does that make sense? You have any other questions?
No, that answers the main ones about it.
That's for temp sensors.
Yeah, how does it work?
Hey, don't you have some tiles to put on the board? Alright.
Actually, one more question. When
Yep.
did they start putting those into cars? Roughly what year?
That's a good question. Roughly the first time they ever think they had to get away from a carburetor, pretty much, wasn't it? 1984?
Early 80s was when they went from carbureted fuel to fuel
Yep.
injected wise, yes. Now,
84?
technically there's still, well, I'll say there was some stuff sort of more resistor or rheostat based than it was that back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
Sort of concept, heat went, it changed, but it wasn't the same.
Okay.
Does anybody have a clue what a rheostat is?
No, I was just about ready to ask
That's
about
old.
that one.
You don't talk about those no more.
We still have them though.
They do have, I mean, like, my brain might come here about one day. I have, it's got rheostats in there. Something you
Yeah.
have that per turn, you turn it, adjust them by.
So a Ford F-150, like if they have a rheostat when you adjust the temperature from hot to cold.
Mm-hmm.
That's a rheostat.
Yep.
It's a carbon track. It's based style position. So
Good idea. Maybe it would be a rheostat in a way. It would be even on fuel pumps. I mean, technically that version when you.
Oh, yeah,
I mean,
that's a
that is
rheostat.
technically
Yeah.
the same thing.
it's a rheostat. So a rheostat is basically instead of temperature, it's movement. Yeah. So real quick rheostat. Let's say 5 volts here, 0 volts here. Comes up. We have basically a shoot. I'm drawing. Yeah, that's
Yeah, that's right.
That'll work.
That'll
Like
work.
this, and then this here is on an arm. Let's say this is a lever, and you got a lever out here that we're making go up and down, and this goes on an arm. It goes over here, and it touches in the middle here. It's got a contactor. So if we push this arm up, this goes like this and contacts basically at ground, and so the resistance will be basically 0. But if we go down here like this and go up here to the top of this, let's say this is a 300 ohm resistor. This is going to be 150.
Yep.
This is going to be 0. This is going to be 300. That's how a fuel gauge works.
Yes. Now, some of them, of course, like, specs 0 to 90, or there's some goofy ones that are they have no 0. The bottom is a number. You're like,
Yeah.
why did you have to go to this and make it where it still
Yeah.
reads something?
Yep. But
That's
that's a rheostat. Yeah. I forgot about rheostat.
So there's all kinds of things like that that do the same concept. That,
Yeah. So that's a rheostat. And so basically, this would have to be, you'd have to have another resistor up here, right? To get a voltage change.
Let me think here.
A fuel gauge, you'd have to have a resistor.
Yes, you have to
Yeah.
have to get a voltage
So
change.
5 volts, a resistor, and then you go down here like this, and this voltage here varies. So
Yeah.
this here again is the comparator, and he's looking at that. And based on fuel level, let's put a little float here. We put fuel level. Based on fuel level, it changes resistance, and that's how a fuel sensor works in that car right there. Right? Make sense? So if you really want to know,
Interesting.
you can go between
You go between ground
Ground
and
and
the wire
here.
coming to it.
yeah,
You can do it, there's one more.
ground to here basically.
Oh, ground to there.
Yeah. And you can see fuel gauges have a spec of like 150 to 90 or
A lot of them are in that realm. There's
Yeah.
there's 0 to 90. There's one of them's like 30 or 60 to 2. There's a whole bunch. I
60
can look up
to-
their specs. I mean, you can do
Yeah.
200.
60 to 200,
I mean,
somewhere in there. So let's say, I guess I don't, but the voltage on a fuel gauge would probably go from like 1 volt or 0.5 to 4.5.
4.5. That's what I was gonna say. That's what I'm thinking. in
So
my head.
this would be 0.5 volts. That'd be 4.5 volts.
4.5 volts, basically. If you're going, yes.
So I've gotten into cars before where the gas gauge doesn't work.
Correct.
Why would that be? What part of that broke?
You probably want like this right here.
Probably that. Now, if you were doing die testing, you go back there and you check. You go back and check, and it's open or it's offset. You want to make sure the gauge is correct. You can put in a resistance when you know the sweep. If you know half of a gauge is on that one would be, okay, we're looking at
120.
25. Once when you put in that setting, it would actually bring the gauge to half. You could actually prove. In some vehicles, you unplug them, they go full field one way, or ground is I forget which way it is.
Yeah, go one way or the other.
One way or the other way to prove the system.
So I have an actual fuel gauge thingy that I actually have back probes on. So you unplug it, plug this thing in, and look at the gauge and go,
Oh, you actually got a.
yeah, I kept one, put long wires on it.
I was thinking about doing that.
I have a whole box of stuff up there. So that's how fuel gauge works.
That's awesome.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So how would you test it? Let's say that car's right there's fuel gauge was completely on full, you knew it was not on full. How would you test it? Here's your own meter, or voltmeter, whichever you'd like to use.
You'd have to reach it, right, in the gas tank? That's where that's located.
So where would you test? Andrew, do you know?
Probably the positive and the negative, right? Like,
Well-
have the 0 volts and then the
So
5
one would
volts.
go here,
Yeah,
okay?
and then the other one would go to the 5 volts, right? At the top.
Yeah, you could do that. I would go to the plug, there's gonna be a plug in, I would go to here, basically.
Okay.
And then what are you looking for? Do you test it? What are you looking for? What do you expect to see there? Because there's no point in doing a test if you don't know what you're looking for. If you don't know what to expect.
I don't know.
So, why did that go all the way to ground? I don't know why I do that.
Yeah, like,
Yeah, that should go like that.
there you go.
So this changes based on, we know the ohms of it, so what will we check here? Let's say we disconnect we're gonna disconnect the car.
The car, which, yeah.
So we're just talking about fuel pump, fuel level sensor here.
Are you looking
What's
for
the spec? What's the spec? What's the range? Possible range. Maximum possible range.
60 to 120 or 60 to 200?
Okay? So let's say the car we thought had half fuel in it. What would we expect?
Like 120.
Yeah.
120.
Ohms or volts?
I would guess ohms.
Okay. So 120. What if we had OL?
Out of limits?
What if it said that?
I don't know.
Would that still be good?
No.
What do you think, Andrew?
I don't think so.
You think so? Why not?
Because it's not reading right.
It's not the new air sensor that they make in GMs? It's not the new air sensor they make in GMs? Okay. Yeah, so that car, if it didn't work, typically on Chevy or just about anything else, it's going to be out of limits. If it doesn't work. If it's inaccurate, then that's
That's a different story.
That's a whole fun thing.
Yes, that is.
Because you basically have to make sure your wires are good
Yes, you do.
and have no high resistance in them.
So that's how you test it.
Thermistors, and that's what's it called? Rheostat?
Rheostat.
I don't even know how to spell
I don't know how to spell rheostat either. My spelling stinks, so that looks great to me.
Rheostat.
It's close enough.
Basically, thermistor is ohms vary based on temperature, and a rheostat is ohms vary based on movement.
On movement, yeah.
Some kind of movement.
Yep.
So,
So what they did is they used temperature so we won't have to move anything. That was
What are you talking
yeah,
about?
they're measuring different things. One of them measuring something that actually physically moves.
oh yeah.
And one's measuring, how do you measure temperature? It doesn't move.
It doesn't move.
You can't measure anything that moves on temperature. Like, how far does 80 degrees move? There's no
So
measurement.
you have to find, that's what they do it the other way, so you can
Okay.
just tell by.
Any other questions before I erase this? I got something else I want to do.
No, that
No
gives me a
questions?
good introduction. I can work off that, sure.
Okay. So next time we get a gas gauge, we're gonna hand it straight to Asa.
Oh, well, I don't know about all that. I'll try though.
You try?
I'll try.
That's good. That's good.
Here's a stand.
Asa loves thermistors. Make sure we can keep that up there.
I sure do.
All right, TPS. 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 Does anybody know what that means?
Tire
Stands for?
pressure
Raw
sensor?
condition sensor.
Hey, somebody's got it. So we got a voltage regulator. We got TPS. There's no voltage regulator in the computer. Okay, so voltage regulator comes out the computer. Goes to TPS, and we got a signal comes out, and then we have a ground. Return. Comes out and goes like that. Okay, we're gonna draw. This is PCM. And where would the comparator be on this system? Right up here. The comparator, the little guy. He's gonna be right here.
Signal wire.
Signal wire. Yep. You almost always have a little comparator there. All right. So basically, a TPS works a lot like a rheostat, but it constantly has 5 volts and ground, and it has a signal wire. Okay. So this is again, what is this thing here?
Resistor.
Okay. I don't know how many ohms that has. It doesn't really matter. All I can tell you is there is 0 volts here and 5 volts there at that resistor. As we get in 5 volts. Okay. Make sense? This is the return or ground. GND. Okay? Does that make sense? We have 0 volts here, 5 volts here, all the time. That never changes. That's a known, always known. Okay, so if I go and connect this right here, we're going to have closer to 0 ohms than 5 volts, right? Sorry, closer to 0 volts than 5 volts. But if I connect it over here, we're going to have probably like 4.5, 4.8 volts, right? Yep. So it changes voltage based on movement, right? Okay. So if we go right in the middle, we're going to have probably 2.5. So let's go over here. I'm going to make a contact right there because that's kind of how it works. It's a carbon trace. It's a carbon trace. Let me make this a little bit more understandable. Like that, and go like this. So it kind of goes, woo-woo. And so this here goes over to throttle shaft and goes down to a this is the intake tube. Going that way. It goes down to a
Go to the throttle body, right there.
throttle body, yeah. Not quite the straightest thing there, but I think you guys can get the point that we get. Goes to throttle body. So as this moves, that throttle's gonna move. Make sense? These little ball joints. So as this throttle moves, this wiper moves across this thing, right? Okay, so if this guy opens, this throttle's gonna go down. It's probably not the best way to do it. Does that make sense? When that throttle opens, this is going to move. What's going to happen to that voltage? It's going to drop. It's going to drop. Typically the opposite way, so I'm drawing kind of the inverse, but so let's say this goes to here. So it's 3/4 throttle. This moves to here, which moves over to here, which moves this over to here. That makes sense how that works?
So the lower the voltage it would go, the more.
It's actually the opposite of that, but I drew it wrong. So
That's what I was thinking. I'm like,
WOT, do anybody know what that means? PT and CT. You have any idea what those mean? Nobody does, do they?
wide open throttle.
You got it. WOT, wide open throttle.
CT is closed, right? P would be partial.
Okay, so they're just all about throttle.
Yep.
Okay.
This little comparator knows that I'm going to change this up a little bit, but you'll get the point. So let's say 4.8 volts equals WOT. So he knows that 4.8 volts equals WOT. He knows the .45 equals CT. Anything in between is quarter throttle. This little guy knows that. He already knows this stuff. Make sense? What's this thing called? It's TPS sensor. Yeah. I'm trying to think what it's kind of a. I don't actually know the name for it, like the actual name of the sensor. It's a rheostat, but it's a rheostat that has power and ground to it, so it changes. A manifold air pressure sensor works the same way. MAP sensor. So TPS, MAP, evap pressure sensor. Works the same way. What else do we call it? Any pressure sensor, so fuel pressure sensor, brake pressure sensor. Pretty much anything that measures pressure in that system. Morning, Sam. Morning, Tyler. Pretty much anything that measures pressure in a system has a rheostat with 5 volts and ground going through it. Make sense? You guys have any questions?
The same one I always have. How do you test it with that?
How do you test it? That's a great question. I always forget about that part. I'm gonna get my trusted little ohm meter out again. You guys you're gonna get to like that thing. Positive, negative. Alright, so how would I test it? What's the first things I have to make it work?
How?
And what?
Power ground.
Power and ground.
Okay.
So if I don't have power and ground, I can't make the functions. So I go over here, I back probe right at the sensor, and I back probe right at the sensor over here. Okay? What am I supposed to have? What should it read?
It should read very the position of the sensor was in, or the
This is a ground return.
that should read
This is 0 volts.
That should read 0 there.
This is a regulated 5 volts
That should read 5 volts.
all the time.
And
So this should be 5 volts, right? Okay?
But what if we saw like, just for sake of,
Yep.
what if we saw like 10 volts?
10 volts. You
Yeah.
got a problem right here.
You got a problem higher up. Okay.
Yeah, you got a problem. This is probably shorted to B plus. Probably shorted to B plus.
Okay.
I was hoping you gave me the other side. What's less than 5 volts? Just pick a number.
2.
2 volts. Let's say we had 2 volts right here. 2 things could be happening. If we had 2 volts across the system, across the sensor, what if we had 5 volts here and 3 volts here? What would our sensor read?
5 volts.
If we had 5 volts here and 3, we're measuring across it. So what if we had 5 volts here and 3 volts here, but we didn't know we had 3 volts? So we're getting 5 minus 2 is 3. So if it showed 2 volts, we're measuring across the sensor, basically just back probing the TPS, and we got 2 volts there. So this could be 3 volts on the ground side, or we could have 2 volts here, and we both read 2 volts. Does that make sense? If we had a good, because one of them is bad. Either the 5 volts is bad or the ground's bad. To read 2 volts over here. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So in that scenario, how do we know?
How do you test it? That's a great question. So if let's say I was reading 2 volts there, first thing I would do is I would take this negative side of my voltmeter and I would go down to ground. And make sure, what should I have then?
Should be 5 volts.
5
if
volts?
not.
5 volts, because I got a regulator here shooting 5 volts out from the computer. If I don't have 5 volts to ground, I got a problem. I'm gonna say we probably do. Let's say we have 5 volts there. So we got 5 volts there, then what do we check?
Ground.
Ground to what?
Power.
Where would we take this wire here?
Battery.
If I have 5 volts here, and I had 2 volts when I go to cross it, the ground side has to have an issue, right?
Right.
Okay. So I would go from ground to basically back to ground there to return and see what I have on that wire. I'm probably gonna have, if I have 5 volts here and I have 2 volts across, then I'm gonna have 3 volts there. So there's a little connector here somewhere that has a bunch of corrosion coming out of it. I don't know how to draw corrosion very good, but it's all green and shit. Okay? That makes sense? So basically, this resistance is fighting this resistance, and this resistance is pulling this resistance, this voltage up. This became a resistor instead of a ground wire. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So how you check that is you go from ground to there, and if you have voltage, you know that you have a bad wire.
Farther up.
Up your system, yeah. Between there and wherever. I mean, it could be right here at the computer, you could have green stuff coming out.
So do you then check that wire in sections to find out what parts?
I like to split stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna start pulling on a couple wires and just looking at the system, the wire harness back probably, and see if you got anything scrubbing, see if you got nasty stuff. But I mean, this doesn't happen very often. But So if you wanted to check this really down and dirty under the hood, let's forget we have any bad wires. We got good wires again. All the wires got magically healed.
Wires found Jesus, I
Yep.
suppose.
The wires found Jesus. We're gonna go right here. We're gonna see what the computer sees just by back probing right there. And take this thing, go back and forth. And I go 45, 0.45 to 4.8, 0.45, 4.8. I can go between them really slow and go 4.5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1 volt, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, 2, 3, 3.5, 4, 4.5, 5.5. Oh, it goes to 0 volts. That's a problem. It should never go to 0 volts. It should never drop out. It should, as you move it, it should consistently go up like this to 5 volt or 4.5 volts. That makes sense?
Yeah.
If it drops out at any time when we're hand moving that thing, it's bad. As long as we got good back probe wires, we're not losing connection.
Is it often that those resistors go bad or no? In,
TPS, it can.
just curious. So what would, you're in the car, what would a failed TPS look like? What would it sound like? What would it look like?
You'd go. Just die off. I mean, it could do that, or it might just go into limp mode because this sensor is very critical to the computer. So if it doesn't have that sensor, it'll set a code instantly, just like that.
And you said limp mode, I'm sorry. I don't know.
It just, yeah.
It's like you have to put like hardly any power.
Oh,
You don't want to go.
So you're going
Yeah.
down 17 at 55, and then all of a sudden you have to go 13 miles an hour on the side of the road.
Okay.
Like a
Alright.
GNC 1500.
Yeah. That's in drive-by-wire stuff, but this here we just come back. It'll probably just come back. Or, this is the cool part, the comparator will say, the rationality, they'll set a rationality, like, I know this ain't rational. It says I'm wide open throttle, but then my map sensor says I'm at idle. Which one he has to literally make a decision which one he's going to believe. Ignore one and use the other. On that car right there, if you unplug the mass airflow sensor, it would say, okay, I have no mass airflow sensor reading. I can't take that input data. He makes a decision, says, I'm going to look at TPS, I'm going to look at map. I'm not going to look at math. Mass airflow. I'm not going to look at mass airflow. I'm going to run on the speed density system as these two. This is the mass airflow system. He makes decisions on the fly and changes stuff. And the crazy part is, he's so good that he can put data in your scan tool that says your TPS is working.
When it's not?
He'll make it say it's working when it's not.
Oh, that's confusing. That's frustrating.
That's frustrating. This is called failure effects EFECTS management. You can still drive the car. FEM, failure effects management, where he will literally make up stuff that he knows will work and puts it in there and runs with it, even though some of it's not working.
That guy's a
But the
bastard.
crazy part is sometimes it'll actually tell you. It's an inferred data. Inferred. It's inferred. It's not real. Okay? That's crazy. Did you know that, Andrew? Yeah.
What a bastard.
FMEM. I thought it was FMEM. It's basically failure effects management. It will make up stuff. If this here just all of a sudden gets wiped out, it'll make up shit. Okay?
So we're doing that.
We're gonna run with this because I know that I can make this car go home based on mass airflow and map. I do not need the throttle position sensor. I'm gonna put some crazy stuff
So
in
that's
there.
a side effect of it rationalizing.
That's all this comparator.
Yeah,
That's all that, man. Whatever you want to call him.
So, but that's designed by the manufacturer so
Yeah.
you can get.
That's people programming it. Hey, what happens if we lose a TPS? Well, if we lose a TPS, we can get home if we just look at mass airflow and manifold pressure.
Cool.
So
That's cool.
That's kind of crazy. I mean, that's a lot higher level stuff, but like it makes sense, right? Cars do that.
It's pretty smart actually. They would do that.
Ford, I think, is the ones that come up with that.
Oh, I don't want to get credit.
I don't like Ford, but you don't want to get Ford on your hands. Okay, so what we covered, we got
A lot.
okay, fence management, we got that.
Hey, could we go through?
Gabe's missing out some good stuff, isn't he?
Yeah. Could we go through if like one morning you kind of gave a demonstration or tutorial on how to use that tester?
The scope?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, I can.
Multimeter?
Yeah, multi. There it is. I couldn't think.
So we went through thermistors, that, we got through that and the rheostat. Symbols, we did some of those. Don't know if we have we only got 10 minutes, so pick something else, but. So do you guys know what series and parallel circuits are?
No.
You probably do.
I do.
So you've watched the videos, you know what it is, but.
Yeah, I have to brush up.
Okay, so 12 volts, and let's do this ground symbol. So a series circuit is 12 volts. You go here, you have a light bulb that goes like this, and you go over here, you have another light bulb like this, and you got a ground. So these are in series, right? Is that correct, Daniel? I get this confused
Series
sometimes.
is all one
It's all
continuous flow.
continuous flow. Okay, so we have 12 volts here. These are also resistors. Let's say these are both the same light bulbs. What do we have right here? What voltage?
You said it was
12
a
volts and
resistor,
ground.
huh?
These have, when they're burning, they have the same resistance in them. So let's say this has
Okay.
20 ohms and 20 ohms.
Voltage drop would be, leave it at 6.
6 volts, be half, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Those are going to burn at half bright because they're literally. If you measure from here to here, you got 6 volts. If you measure from here to here, you got 6 volts. So instead of them running on 12 volts, they're on 6 volts because they're using each other for a drop down
You're
resistor.
gonna run a little over.
Make sense?
It's kind of cool.
So that's a series, right?
Yep, series. One continuous thing from one point to another.
So a parallel circuit is 12 volts, comes down here, ground here, and okay, so we go here, we drop down here, drop down here, we drop down. And then we have I'll go to ground. So how much is across all those volts?
12 volts.
Okay?
Voltage.
Because you got 12 here, you got 12 here, and you got 12 here, and you got 0 here, and 0 here, and 0 here. This is the parallel.
Well, you're saying you have 0 after the light resistor thing?
0 here, 0 here, 0 here.
That's how
Well,
all
okay.
cars are
And then you
actually
have
ran.
And most everything is, except for fuses. In all reality, fuses are the only thing on series.
Yeah. GM used this system here. They would run cooling fans. They'd have 2 cooling fans. They would have a bunch of relays, and you'd run them in certain orders. And they would go from a parallel circuit to a series circuit. This was the low speed, and this was the high speed.
Seems a little more complicated than it needs
It's
to be.
kind of complicated, but it worked reliably.
Oh, okay. If it worked
But the
reliably-
problem is, it would switch it between the two. So let's say for this to flow, to have resistance through here and to have current flow, you have to have both of these light bulbs has to be good. What happens if one of these goes bad?
both go bad.
Does that one work?
No.
It doesn't work. So on GM system, when they lost one cooling fan, they lost the low speed. They still had the high speed with one of them if it worked, but they would lose the low speed.
The amperage,
This is more redundant.
amperage is constant in series, I believe, and its voltage is what changes in parallels.
That would make sense.
Amperage is constant and series. Well, amperage is constant. Well,
Or I might be thinking of it backwards.
this and this wouldn't change, but this amperage would. Yeah, I don't know.
That's cool.
That make sense?
Why do they have series and parallel? What's the benefit of series compared to parallel? Why would you use parallel over series, and why would you use series?
Most stuff on cars is parallel. All the bulbs are parallel, because if they did, one of them go bad and they'd all stop working. Be real stupid. What is series? What's in series on a car? There's more resistors in series than there really is bulbs. The only thing I can think of that did this was the cooling fans on a Chevy Venture. They were like that. They would change them. And you can, that diagram is like, it's got 3 relays and it runs this one plus this one to make a series, and all the relays have 5 terminals instead of 4 because they have to use the backside of them. It has to shut and then it has to work. So you can have bad relays that have, yeah, it was complicated. So there's basically, they did it away with most of this. That's hardly ever in a car anymore. Cool. Make sense though?
That's awesome.
Christmas lights, I think, are in series. I'm pretty sure they are. 'Cause if you smash one bulb, does the whole thing go out?
Yep.
Sometimes.
Or at
Or a
least
section
they
of it?
used to.
Up to that point.
Old style.
Yeah.
The old ones do.
Yeah, so how do you know if it's bad? You
Well, we
don't.
must have some old Christmas
I mean, you
lights.
don't know which one's bad really, because one of them got cut and they all go out. So, does that make
You know,
sense?
like where you break it, and then all the whole line.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so
Because it breaks the circuit.
morning.
They use the bulb as the path for the ground and power, essentially.
A little bit.
So do you guys know what this symbol here is? This is, so far it's a box with 2 sticks on it, but go like this and this. What's that symbol?
Thermistor.
Thermistor.
Jake's favorite.
That is literally my favorite thing.
It is?
It's right there with pulse width modulator, but that's probably the coolest bit of engineering.
Okay.
I love that.
Pulse width modulator. Cool. Thermistors, we did parallel and series. What else you guys want to learn about? You guys want to learn about mass airflow sensors, symbols.
Kind of.
Let me draw something so good. That's thermistor. Let's get, so this manifold absolute pressure sensor, it's got 3 wires to it, just like the rest of them. Morning, guys. Actually, here's the thermistor. If you guys want to see it, right here. That's the square box is a resistor. It's got a little line through it. 0 volts, 5 volts. It's got the comparator right there. 5 volts. Another resistor up in the computer. But that's the thermistor. That's also the thermistor. Manifold app. Mass airflow intake air temp. Mass airflow sensors on GM have an intake air temp sensor in them. So that's that.
That's what you got.
What's this symbol? It's just a little different way they draw it.
I'm gonna guess.
Did you forget we were doing these? You did?
Dude, we had a whole week that we weren't doing it.
I know, I know.
And then Drew texted me, shit.
You missed a lot of good stuff. You missed a lot of good stuff.
Thermistors.
Rheostats.
Parallel and series circuits, TPSs, thermistors. Yeah, that's pretty much what we covered this morning, but.
Oh, yeah. One more thing.
That's a splice, right?
Which splice is it?
Number 306.
306. Splice 306.
Spice 306.
Spice 306, yeah. It's actually the new store I'm starting for Spice.
Yes.
That's Spice Bar. Right down there.
What's that?
Huh?
What's that thing? Or like this, they'll draw it different sometimes. You know what that is? What's this thing?
Connector.
Like the 102?
What's the C stand for?
Connector.
Alright. What's that point for?
Size of the wire.
What's 3127 stand for?
Circuit number.
Oh goodness. And BK. What's that stand for?
Colors.
What is it?
Orange and black.
Orange and black.
GY. What's that be?
Gray.
Jimmy's got a book over there. You want to look at it? The big fat book on his box over to the right with the natural hat on it.
I don't think I've had it. You just need to know if you don't just shit for it.
What does a 5 right by connector stand for? Well, 5 and a 6.
And number
A number of what?
of connector 301.
Okay. You guys are getting this stuff. C301. And then what if this line stops and this is the PC on here? And we got another connector comes in here. And another one here. And well, if this line stops right here, this is 16 and 36. What's that mean?
Those are.
Is there another connector?
Yeah, it's
You tell me.
It's the new pin number is the connector 3.
Connector 3, new pin numbers?
Yeah.
Okay. What's those mean?
Circuit numbers.
Point 2 and point 9, what's that mean?
The thickness of wire, right?
He's thinking of trying to confuse us on his colors.
And I don't know what VT stands for.
Violet.
Violet.
Blue.
Okay.
Hey, you guys are getting it. Now the next step is to have you guys come up and write it.
Oh, I'll do it.
Okay, so draw me a connector.
Oh, you want me to draw it?
Yeah, you have to write it.
Okay.
Yeah, this will be a full send.
Full send?
Yep. Just,
Full send or no send, Ricky?
oh, you can't look at my stuff. No, absolutely not.
Are you talking about Casey? Never seen this.
What's point 5 mean?
Size of the wire.
Size of the wire? Okay.
We'll do
BK.
PK.
Yep. It's all good. TN. Black and blue.
Blue. Black and blue.
Okay.
Down. We'll say this.
Morning, Mike. You can. You can splice anywhere in the system. We're going to put a splice, you can put a splice.
I want to be like a GM engineer, really at this up.
There we go.
7 different splices.
302. The thing about writing is you get to do whatever you want.
Yeah, I like it.
Whatever you want.
Like it. The size, color. We're gonna need a connector. Oh, a circuit.
Circuit number.
Yeah,
Put
circuit.
it right beside it. It's usually like 3 or 4 different.
All the ones I've.
Oh, no. Circuit?
Yeah, circuit.
Just put a number.
Oh, we don't need a.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But 4,
There we go.
420.
Yeah.
That's weed day.
Yeah, of course it is.
How would you know, Dave?
It might be
I didn't know, but a bunch of other people told me.
birthday.
And then we'll go 1, 2, 3. And that's the circuit number, and these will be connectors.
What connector is that though? That's a PCM. You got wires in the PCM. But so, last time we did like this.
Oh, yeah.
And at the end it'll say C3 PCM. Yeah? Yeah. So, last time we had a connector. There you go. Cool.
Alright.
1, 2, 3, 4. That make sense, guys? If you can draw it, you can definitely read it, right?
Yeah.
If you can draw it, you can read it.
And this is GM because they put a splice right after a connector.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is that how always they just throw slices in
No,
there?
I just think it's the stupidest thing I can think of.
Okay. That's pretty good though. So,
That's fun.
you think you can draw a thermistor? Asa, can you draw a thermistor? I'll bet you can draw a thermistor. Down. Box. You don't need to print a part of that though.
Asa, I'm gonna need you to time make one now.
Do resistor. You draw your arrow. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, if it's a positive or negative, do you think that arrow will be pointing up or down?
It's a symbol. So GM does it like this. Let's say we're on GM. GM does it like this. They put a square box. They don't tell you that it's a resistor, but it is. Okay. And then into that. That's a GM.
I think I won't be able to draw my love.
Your love of GMs? Oh, your love that? Honestly, you should get a picture of a thermistor, and I should cut it out, and you should put it on the back of your car.
Honestly, I think I might.
Real quick, we only have a couple more minutes. It's a PCM, and you see a symbol like this. You know what that is? And then it goes down to a resistor, which GM uses boxes for resistors and goes down. Got your comparator right here. But what is this guy right here? What is that?
Source.
But what is it? What's it actually? What is it actually? It's where it's a source, but it's, let's say it's 5 volts. Why is it like, what keeps it at 5 volts?
I actually don't know.
Oh, a regulator.
It's a regulator. Every time you see that cross with that, sometimes it'll just say like 5 volts, whatever. But typically it's 5 volts and a resistor, and then the comparator comes out. Just like, I mean, there literally is low pressure temp sensor signal. It's the same exact way as that's drawn on GM lacrosse 3.6. So, does that make sense, everybody?
Yeah.
It's past 8 o'clock. Let's go.
You can check off symbols too.
Symbols? We aren't done with symbols.
Ah, yes, my favorite
There's
part.
a lot of symbols. We don't get off that easy.
Here's a good thought. Good try. I've been trying to get try.
That kind of good try.
Who?